Hello. Hey, Poonam.
Hey, Parker.
Hello. Good to see you. And I'm glad to be here with everyone today. And the topic is a global conflict. How do we support peace on Earth? And will global conflict ever end? There's many different ways that this question or comment comes up in the spiritual communities that I'm around. So it's a pretty fascinating topic because it's got all the makings, all the seductive things the ego likes, a little bit of fear, right? A little bit of anxiety, anticipation, maybe a little superiority, right? In the end, it's a feeling maybe of things just being out of hand, instability that can't be, that there's nothing an individual all by themselves can rectify it. When we recognize that we're all one, that it's all oneness, that what we do to ourselves, we do to the world, what we do to the world, we do to ourselves, that it's this just big magnetic energy field, and it's intelligence, and it's intelligent because it's operating through each and every one of us, and we're only responsible for what comes through this form. How peaceful is this form? That is the return of Jesus. It's the Christ consciousness in each person, maybe, right? It's not through a belief system, it's through a deep realization and awareness of the insanity that's inside of us, and we liberate that dark matter, that dense energy. We liberate it when we give it our attention, our undivided, devoted attention as it appears. And then we may feel drawn to adding some peacefulness to a situation or doing something that balances out our being. Maybe we will. But the single most important thing is are we at peace? And you can share that peace. You can go into a situation that's not at peace, and without a word, if you're at peace, can spread that peace in that space. Maybe you don't, maybe it's not enough presence power and the violence goes on. You still only have this very moment to make a choice, to recognize that you have a choice. More importantly, that our peacefulness is all that really matters. Fearful mind has thoughts. The planet won't survive. We'll kill the planet. We'll kill the species on the planet, killing this beautiful home of ours. Yes, maybe we will. Maybe that is the way it goes, that our species destroys this planet. She could also shake us off, or we could learn to live with an understanding that we all are connected, and that all the things, less identified with the dream, so less getting. Look how much less violent it already is. I like to maybe put our attention there, about how beautifully as a whole we've improved how we treat human beings and other species, generation after generation. And by treating it better, it's not just a new set of rules, it's just the loving impulse of wanting every human being to be honored exactly where they're at. And so lots of peace is already happening on this planet. If it wasn't, we would have already destroyed it. So let's gently hold the peace and deepen that practice. And we deepen that practice by balancing, learning that balance of being and doing. So I don't ever hear Eckhart say you must do a meditation practice when you're in presence. Everything is a meditation. You notice that you move slowly, that we're doing one thing at a time, and that's peaceful. Is everything that we're doing at peace? Are we slamming things? Krishnamurti writes a lot about violence and conflict, and about how for people, for instance, like me, who grew up in a violent space, the bar for abuse is askew, because we don't. And Krishnamurti is beautiful about peeling off, like, okay, are you violently putting the dish in the thing, in the dishwasher, in the drain? Are you thinking violent thoughts about someone? Are you being jealous, petty, and competitive? All of these things is an energetic field of violence, and I've learned an awful lot about that from him, and lots about presence and doing one thing at a time, and separating from the dream, these passing clouds that go by, and recognizing what you're feeding yourself. Are you feeding yourself violence? Are you watching television, violent shows? You watch the media? Is there a habit of watching the media? Reading articles, discussing opinions, having a political view, being right? Then now that is violence. So if we see the insanity in that, if we can see it, then we recognize that the most powerful thing we can do is to die every moment, to show up wherever we feel called from, that we're living from a place of spaciousness, from such spaciousness that there's levity as the heaviness comes our way, our own personal heavy patterns. There's a softness around looking at things, the gooey stuff that we see up, or that we may feel like we've been running from, of our own patterns, that wants that violence in some way, right? To be able to see that and to approach that with complete honesty liberates it. So maybe if we can reform the question, is how much peace can I bring into my moment by moment, and allow the world to unfold, and to recognize that anything that doesn't hold the fullness of being a human being, to be a human being, will be challenged. That's how it is. And this is a big one that we're all carrying together, and that nobody really knows what the end is going to look like. But we don't know anything, but when we come from a place of not knowing, then you can see a much fuller picture of the beauty that's happening on this planet, amongst us and inside of us.
This reminds me of the meme that circulates, and I actually used it for its synchronicity again. I used it for a group meditation for the 6th, which is something along the lines of Eckhart saying the pollution on the planet is equivalent of millions of humans not taking responsibility for their state of consciousness. And look what happens with that kind of pollution off the planet. Then there is so much of plastic waste, there's so much of destruction, right? That's what he is pointing to. So if you're saying that we want peace on this planet. So every other creature, whether it's a dog, animal, deer, they live in total harmony with planetary intelligence. Like a dog is not going, oh, I'm going to just throw away this plastic thing, right? It's just humans that do the unconscious stuff. It's only the animal species called human being that is doing all the destruction. So I did have this thought because I wanted to write that book on limiting beliefs, that how do you erase all the limiting beliefs? So just like how Marianne Williamson, right, she's talking about reparations. It's not so much as reparation. So if we look at the energetic pattern, um, let's say you're African American, goes back to the whole chapter 5 of A New Earth, of the collective pain body. So if I'm a woman, I already have the collective pain body of all the women in the medieval, mid-century that were burned on the stake, right? That's what Eckhart talks about in the collective pain body. So if I'm African American, then I already have a pain body of being a slave for 200, 300 years. Generationally, I may not be a slave right now, but I do carry energetically in my pranic body, I'm carrying that memory, right? Every person that is born in India is carrying the memory of being subjugated by the British. Every Jewish person is carrying the pain body of being subjugated by the Germans, right? So all those are limiting beliefs. So how do you erase it? How do you erase, how does a person erase that limiting belief? If one is presence, have that presence power, that if you're German, that when you see a Jewish person, you don't see a Jewish person, you just see another field of presence. You interact presence, this is my presence, and I'm going to interact with you, right? So go mix with more Jewish people. Do something good for Jewish people. Don't wait for the government to do reparations, right? If you're Caucasian, do something for an African American family, right? Give donations, donate charity work for African American families. Don't wait for the government to do reparations, right? Then we erase that limiting belief. Go mix with them. Go live with them. Have them as friends. Then then you become that inclusion starts, right? That I don't I don't have that separation. This is not an enemy. Middle East is not an enemy. So Soviet Union or Russia is not an enemy, or North Korea is not an enemy. Every person is an expression of this one consciousness, whether they were born in North Korea, whether they were born in Pakistan, whether they were born as that ISIS terrorists, they're all an expression of this one consciousness. Yeah, they may have layers of their own limiting beliefs and their own patterns, right, that they need to erase. So what does it take for every human to erase their patterns? That's when peace will come on this planet. It's going to take that level, that degree of, I mean, I think of a few things that Eckhart has not really delved into. What he has focused on, what I see him focusing on, is just the causal level, right? The cause of pain and suffering is that humans are not in presence, that they need to increase their awareness. They need to, and awareness, he finally talks about it in this conscious manifestation course. Never has he talked about it in A New Earth or The Power of Now. Finally, in the conscious manifestation course, he says, it's your vibrational energy. you have to raise your vibrational energy. If you want to drop your thoughts, limiting or whatever the negative thoughts are, you have to increase your vibrational energy. That part, 7 billion humans or 8 billion, whatever we are right now, have to increase their vibrational energy to the point where all they are is each person is acting as a field of presence. They don't see the other. The other and me are one. This whole cosmos is the one,
Yes.
right?
And beautiful, beautiful. I like what you said. I also want to say that it's also a limiting belief that this chaos shouldn't be this way, or that it's not necessary. It's necessary. We know it's necessary because that's what's happened, and that's
It's
what we've needed. And
it's
so, and
ness.
also the mass, the people, the mass consciousness of people that own slave, that's its own energy field, right? And all of these, no, it's not a victim and perpetrator, and it stays that way. It's sort of an exchange of energy that happens and happens again and again and again. And that when we recognize the sameness, one of the beautiful things about technology is that people are introduced from a very early age to other people from all around the world, and there's it naturally unfolds that you have that you recognize the other is no longer other. And I would love to see this planet like we see it as an astronaut from space, where there's not this boundary with the name and these are your customs and religions and laws that most of the laws that we have are just to prevent the excess of the ego, is what Eckhart says, and it's true, right? If we feel that, it's true. And so part of being at peace is to recognizing the paradox that the chaos has infinite order, that it's going, that it all makes sense, and that any belief is a contraction almost, right? Just the word belief, because it sets itself aside from other perspective, other ways of seeing something. It sets itself an opinion on something.
And then that's why I prefix it with limiting, because it is not the infinite, the eternal. It limits us. Then we have
Yeah.
selective perception. The chaos is necessary until, anything that is generated out of the ego, that's the safety valve. The chaos is being generated as a safety valve for the ego to remain contained, right? Because every suffering, Eckhart says that it's true for me. I'm sure it's true for Parker. All our suffering brought us to this moment where we are self-aware, or we have come to the point of self-awareness, right? So we see the blessing, we see the grace in all our losses, all the suffering that was offered to us. And that is what all the suffering in the universe is about. Like people talk about, oh, why did Hurricane Sandy happen, or the tsunami happen, or why did New Orleans, whatever hit New Orleans? But people don't see that how much compassion and help, like people break down their barriers and start helping each other. I've heard so many people in New York say, I never talked to this neighbor for 30 years, but because of Hurricane Sandy, I had to go help the old lady out of her house. And how much togetherness, and how much it's so beautiful in the midst of all this chaos, is this beautiful, beautiful energy of presence. The best way I have heard people explain it is people who have gone through a near-death experience, which is Anita Murjani in her book. Y'all can Google it. and see what books she's written. Dr. Eben Alexander. So I do sacred acoustics, and Dr. Eben Alexander has actually recommended sacred acoustics because he says he's a neuroscientist who had a meningitis or some kind of bacteria in his brain, and his whole brain died. So once brain dies, it's a physical death, right? So he had a near-death experience, and then he explained. Oprah on her show Super Soul Sunday had a conversation with him, and he said it almost is like you're going through this luminous tube of light. It's pure white energy, and the most beautiful thing he explained is just like that hug we saw from Eckhart, that the experience of the soul when it leaves the physical body is unconditional love.